Okay, I wanted to take you through this problem. This is number 7 from homework 8.2. Um, and in 8.2, we're looking at how the sampling distribution of a proportion relates to the population proportion and standard deviation. So this student successfully completed first a test to see that it's approximately normal. They calculated the sample mean, which is the same as the population mean, right? I shouldn't say mean, as sample. The sample proportion is the same as the population proportion, and they had to do standard deviation here, okay, which is calculated with the formula using the population proportion, okay, and we then she answers a couple of questions about what the probability of having a sample with adults of more than 20% that don't own a credit card, that kind of stuff. But we get down to this last question, which is really where that question is. Would it be unusual for a random sample of 500 adults to result in 75 or fewer who do not own a credit card? Why? So this is what can happen, right? Even though the population proportion 16%, you can get a sampling of 500 people and get an unusually low number of adults that do not own a credit card, or unusually high proportion of adults that have a credit card. Okay, and one of the things that we're going to do in this class is kind of more rigorously define what is an unusual sample. Okay, you can, a lot of times you can just see a sample and you say, oh, that's unusual. But here we're going to say that a sample is unusual if it's less than 5. If you're given the population proportion, you're less than 5%. You're less than 5% likely to get that for a sample proportion. Okay, so we know it's normally distributed, so we are going to use the normal curve calculator, which is theirs. Okay, and we know the mean is 0.16, right? That's up here. We figured out the standard deviation was about 1.6%. Okay, and we want to know what's the probability of getting 75 or fewer who do not own a credit card. Okay. Oh, yeah, I forgot. So this whole thing's done in a proportion, right? And I just typed in 75, but you really have to divide 775 by 500 to get the proportion of adults in that sample. So let me do that real quick. 75 divided by 500. What percent would that be? Or what proportion would that be? It would be 0.15. So what's the probability that we get 15% or less? Okay. And that's 26, 26%. And we say the result is not unusual because it's 26% is above, right? Is above 5%, which is greater than 5%. So like if for another, so we say we did a sample of 500 people and we found that only 1% of those people do not own a credit card. What is the chance of having a 500 sample? And it's like incredibly small. That's so small it might be a little lost. Let's do like something like only 7% of them do not have credit cards. That's still really small. About 0.1. Yeah. So there you can see it without the scientific notation, right? It's like this is way less than a 1% probability So that would be a very unusual sample if you sampled 500 people and only 10% of them do not own a credit card. Okay, so I hope that explains this a little bit. It's really just calculating the probability of getting 75 out of 500 adults um, in a sample that do not own a credit card, and then just comparing that to 5%. Is it greater or is it less than 5%? If it's greater, we say, hey, that's usual or that's fairly typical. If it's less, then we say that's unusual. So I hope that helps a little bit.